Hey everyone, welcome to the Washington Post. For anyone who's here really, really early, which is probably like two of you, but I'm so happy that you're here because this is a special day. We are talking not only about one of my favorite game series of all time, Resident Evil, but we are here with what I consider, I think most people consider one of the real sources of Resident Evil information, a real Resident Evil historian. We have the Sphere Hunter, Suzi Hunter here in
Post.
live with the Washington Post. Hi, Suzi.
Hello, how's it going? Thank you
Good,
for
good. Thanks for
the
joining
the
us.
illustrious intro. I really appreciate it. I
Yeah, I
appreciate it.
mean, we got Chris Redfield here too, so we got the whole gang. We got two
I
camis in the back,
know.
so it's a
Yes.
whole Capcom celebration here.
It's massive. There's so much Capcom going on right now.
Yeah, yeah.
It's exciting.
Capcom's been really on a roll for the last few years, hasn't it? Haven't they?
They sure are. Yeah, I mean like Monster Hunter, RE7,
Hmm.
RE2R, um what else came out? Mega Man 11. Yeah, like they've just been like bringing
Mega
so
Man
many things
11 was
back.
amazing, right? So it's
Yeah.
like they really, really seem to have found like what made their older games special, and they've been able to translate um uh, uh that to the modern era and to great success. But speaking of, the older games and how they
Yes.
translate, you know, we're famous here for really, really bad segues here at launcher.gg. Uh, but I just want to know more about you and your history with the Resident Evil series. When did you get started? When did you first play your first Resident Evil game? What was your first one?
So this might surprise a couple people. I've definitely told this story before,
Mhm.
but this might surprise a couple people. But I started playing Resident Evil, the series, in 1999.
Mm.
Um, one day, one of my like older siblings, well, okay, let me back up a little bit. I saw Leon on the cover of like PlayStation magazine, and I thought he looked so cool. It's just like it was just like a really cool drawing of Leon like fighting a zombie, he's like running away or like gun butting one or something like that. And I thought he looked so cool. I was like, I want to I want to play as the blue guy. I want to be the blue guy. And my brother like one night he just like came home from work or whatever and he had RE1, 2 and 3 because they were all three of those games were out at the time.
Mhm.
He brought them home and a Leon action figure. And I was like, "This is like Christmas for me
Uh-huh.
right now." So that's when we started playing it, and we sort of like, because I think Nemesis was like hot at the time, like that had just come out, or maybe like Dino Crisis. It was around that era,
Mhm.
of like Capcom.
Mhm.
So
Onimusha
yeah,
2, all that stuff, right?
yeah, yeah. I think Onimusha came out like a year later. I
I
think
forget.
like
I
2000
forget. It
something,
all feels like
something like
ancient
that.
history by now.
That's another Onimusha is another series that I'm gonna dive really deep into at some point.
Ooh.
But yeah, so and it's funny too because I was so excited to play as the blue guy that when we started playing the games proper, the the first game, the zombie turning his head obviously was like the scariest thing of all time for me. And I ran out of the room and my brother was just like cackling. He thought it was the
Mhm.
funniest thing ever. But eventually I worked up the courage to actually play the games for myself. Um, Played through RE1, finished RE2. We did I did the Claire A disc, and
Mhm.
then my friend played Leon B, and we we basically watched each other play the game.
Mhm.
And then I played RE3 on my own. But yeah, it's very much a like a family thing for me. Like I've always played a Resident Evil game with a family member. I think Village is like the only one that I haven't played with someone, which is obviously like pandemic stuff is like it's hard to travel now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I started really early and and I have this like unique experience of being able to kind of play them all as they came out so I could
Yeah.
like see the series grow and change in interesting
Mhm.
ways. But yeah,
Mhm.
started with RE1
Yeah.
at the very beginning.
And if you're just joining us right now, we got the Sphere Hunter. Sphere Hunter has a YouTube channel and she
Yes.
publishes all kinds of great analyses on like all the kinds of games that I love.
Yes. Yes.
Bayonetta. She's got the weird DMC Devil May Cry coming up. The review coming up, but she's done Bayonetta. She does all the Resident Evil series. She does Devil May Cry.
Yeah,
Just so many Capcom games for sure. Um,
definitely. Definitely. One of my
and
one of my nicknames on the internet is Cap Mom.
Cat Mom.
So
Oh.
yeah, because I
Uh-huh.
cover all of the things, or
Yeah,
I try my
actually
best
haven't.
to.
I actually haven't heard that about you. For me,
Yeah.
Resident Evil, I played Resident Evil 1 because I was so excited because I was like, this looks like an awesome adventure game. I was like, I wish like a game like Myst was like fun to play, you know? So so I was like,
Not fired at Mist. Oh my God.
yeah, I mean, like, look, I enjoyed Myst, but it's like I wish I had a gun, and then so now I was like, oh, you get to be a
Yeah,
guy
yeah,
and a
yeah.
girl, Chris Redfield or
Yeah.
Jill Valentine with a gun, and I was just like, this is great. And then I stopped playing video games right around 1998, 99.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was high
Okay.
school for me. So
Gotcha,
like I
gotcha.
just like was interested in other things. And it
Yeah.
wasn't until my first year of college when I went to a friend's house and I saw him playing he still had his PlayStation 1 and he was playing Metal Gear Solid and then he later played Resident Evil 2 and I was like, "Wait, that looks like Resident Evil." They came out with a second one and
Yeah.
then like that Resident Evil 2 and with like Claire and Leon being on two different discs and Metal Gear Solid being like so like Metal Gear Solid and everything what it is, I was like video games are great again. Like what
Yeah,
are they
yeah.
doing with video games? This is amazing. So
There were
Resident Evil
definitely a
2 was
couple years
definitely
there. Yeah, where it was kind of, huh, but yeah.
yeah, so it was like Resi 2 and Metal Gear Solid that got me into gaming, and I was like, okay, I'm solidly back in. This is like way too crazy. So I
That's so
definitely,
that's so interesting that you bring that up because I definitely had a moment like that where I was just like tired of video games, but it was
hmm
like much later, I think. Like around
yeah.
like the DMC4 RE5 era of video games where I was kind of just like, I'm good. I'm good for a while.
It was kind of a dark period during that time,
Yeah,
Even Capcom, staying on the issue of Capcom, Capcom was still trying to find itself too,
for sure. Yeah.
because they were coming out with games that I really liked, like Bionic Commando. Like I really enjoyed Bionic
Yeah,
Commando,
yeah. Yeah.
but not a lot of people liked it, and I can understand why.
Yeah, yeah.
But outside like a
That's an
lot of those games.
interesting one, yeah, for sure. I feel like more people like Bionic Commando now than they did back then. But anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah, but
interject.
like it was always like games that you kind of had to like understand, versus like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, this is like Resident Evil 2 remake where like, oh, I totally get this because they made it so well
Oh
and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
the
for
vision
sure.
is so clear.
Yeah.
Um,
And there's something to like pull from that's
mhm.
like a huge thing already. Like Bionic Commando is kind of just like, oh, okay, like they made some old games like in the 80s and
Mm.
90s. I guess this is a new one. Like
Yeah, I guess that's why like I was kind of glad that Ghosts and Goblins it just ended up being like a straight like Ghosts and
that's
Goblins remake,
another
you know?
one. Yeah.
You
And
know?
that one I'm pretty sure was pretty successful, like well received. Like a lot of people enjoyed it and well,
Yeah.
it's hard, but
Although,
they enjoyed
although,
it.
although, and this is probably obscure, I will always stand Maximo. Do you remember
That
Maximo?
game is definitely obscure. Yeah, it's like a
Yeah.
weird fixed camera behind the back Ghosts and
Yeah,
Goblins.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like a
the Ghost and
spiritual successor.
Goblin sequel. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that one's really obscure, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
How do you feel about how the series has evolved over the years? Where do you think Resident Evil is now?
Um, I I think this might be a controversial answer, but I think the series is in a very good place. I And this kind of goes back to me like sort of playing them all throughout the years. Like literally I've played basically every Resident Evil game. I
Exactly,
like
yeah.
I like have them all on that shelf right there on like every console that they've ever
hmm
been on. And the Japanese ones are up here, so like
Uh-huh.
but I think the reason why Resident Evil is so successful, and when I say it's in a good place, like I mean that it's like the general consensus is that people really like it,
hmm
like even like a weaker entry like RE3 remake. And I
hmm
think the reason for that is because Capcom is willing to experiment with Resident Evil where other horror IPs have sort of like failed trying to stay exactly to what a series used to be, or like,
Mhm.
or like just lying to their fan base of like
Mhm.
having like, oh, like this Silent Hill game sure is going back to its roots. And it's
Mhm.
like, do you think going back to your roots is like making a boring, slow video game? Like Silent Hill is like a quick, snappy, like it's like Resident Evil,
Mhm.
like it was never like, and then they just missed the point. I think Capcom does a really great job at just being like, oh, we're just gonna go in this different direction. Like the marketing for Village, like they were just so open about, oh, it's more like action focused. Like it's a
Mhm.
survival horror game. It has survival horror elements, but we're going in a more action oriented direction with it. And it's like, oh yeah, I know what to expect, It's
Mhm.
and when
It's
I
funny
play
that
it,
you.
like it feels like a unique experience that's like fun and replayable and like
Yeah.
you never know what's gonna happen, Like
It's funny that you mentioned the marketing because the Japanese puppets commercials
yeah.
for Village have been going viral, and it's almost like they're being cheeky about how they're lying. That
Yeah, yeah.
like you mentioned lying in marketing, and it's like, okay, well, like this game is really not scary. We promise.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that's also really good too, because that sort of plays into the theme of like you don't know what to expect from Village, because when you play it, it's like you think it's gonna go one way, and then it's like, oh wow, like
Mhm.
I never would have thought that Resident Evil would go in that direction,
Mhm.
like just straight up like terrifying. You know what I'm talking about, the part that I'm talking about,
Yes, yes, absolutely.
where it's just
Yeah.
like, oh my God, what? Like really? Like holy shit.
Yeah,
So
we will definitely talk about that part a lot more
yeah.
later.
So it's like
And
like the puppet commercials are sort of in line with what the game is, but
mhm.
at the same time it's like, yeah, like this is just like this is a really, really good way of getting people to talk about this game. It's like
Exactly, and the
cute
puppet
little puppets.
commercials only underscore like how much personality the new game has versus anything
Yeah,
else. It's like
yeah, for
look
sure.
at our villains cast. Like what kind of like rogues gallery does one game have versus like
Exactly, yeah.
like a whole series, And it's like this one game has so many interesting characters that are really fun with really unique and almost immediately iconic designs already.
Exactly. They're all memorable, which is like you can't really say that about some of the games that came before it. Like there's always like one part where like someone will replay Resident Evil game and be like, "Oh, I forgot about this guy," or like, "I forgot about this part." Like the thing about Village is like everything is so clearly defined. Like
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, wow. There's probably tons of like when I was playing Resident Evil 5 recently, I was like, I totally forgot who Irving was. Uh,
yeah, exactly. So many people forget about Irving because he's so bizarre and doesn't fit in at all.
he's
It's
so
like,
bizarre and he's such a bad character. And like when he gives that
yeah,
line, he's like, I'm a businessman with standards. I'm
I
just like,
love
oh,
that line.
I hate this part.
That's my favorite line. A businessman with standards. It's like, why does he have a Boston Like, who is this guy?
Like, where does this accent come from? Why are you in the middle of
Yeah,
Africa talking like this? I
yeah,
was like,
he's like a crime lord. Like, it doesn't make any sense,
yeah.
Like, it's really weird.
I think Resident Evil 5 was emblematic of like kind of like the dark period of like what you were talking about earlier, where it was like a lot of games were just trying to be kind of like edgy and like crime lord. Like here's a crime
Yeah,
lord
for
because
sure.
for the sake of it, right?
Yeah, for sure. Even though like RE5 is definitely like it still has that like wholesome 90s Capcom feel to it where it's like I'm Chris Redfield and I've got a job to do. But then it just makes those moments stand out so much more where you're like, "Wait, why is there like a crime boss here? It doesn't make any sense to me."
Still extremely goofy.
Yeah,
When
for sure.
like right after the businessman with standards line and Irving runs off in a boat and then like he's Irving is like really far away and then Chris like finally yells, "Hey, wait!" And I'm just like
Yeah, yeah.
like I think he's not really gonna get that message, Chris.
Yeah,
Like
exactly. That Resident Evil energy is like still there.
it's
It's like right under the surface. Yeah.
it's right under, like it can't, which is why like I appreciate Village so much. It's
Oh
like it just
yeah, yeah.
like lets that out. It's like
For
okay,
sure. Yeah,
let's
definitely.
just have all this weird energy out.
It's
I'm
funny, like just like one more point, like about
uh-huh.
that in particular. I spoke to Hideaki Itsuno, who's the director of DMC5 Dragon's Dogma,
Mhm.
and I asked him about that, like for Devil May Cry, like how do you guys achieve a balance of like making me care about these characters, but then also like having them do like a Michael Jackson dance like right after a big serious scene. And he just like laid it out like plainly like we write with the intention of like the player caring about the characters. Like we want you to care, but we also love like really cheesy action movies from
Hmm.
like the 80s and 90s. So like we always want to inject that kind of like energy into our games, like no matter what it is. So
Hmm.
I think that definitely speaks towards like Resident Evil as a whole. Is like it has like a lot of really cheesy wholesomeness, like wholesome energy in it.
Uh-huh. I think like I was really excited to hear that because like I would love to hear like peer more into their brain to see how they're able to
Yeah,
like
for
balance
sure.
this, you know.
Definitely.
Speaking of which, like I'd love to find out more about how you grew your career as a YouTuber and how you've been able to kind of make all these connections where you can just talk to the director of Dragon's Dogma,
Yeah.
awesome game, another one by the way, and
Yeah,
ask him
yeah.
about like how he makes the stuff. And you do streams with the voice talent for Jill
Yeah,
Valentine.
yeah.
Um, you just did a stream yesterday with the voice talent for Leon Kennedy.
Yes.
I don't know all these names, so if you want to plug them,
Yeah, yeah,
please go
yeah.
ahead. But yeah, I mean, tell me
Um,
about how you got how you your trajectory of where you are today.
So, like any other YouTuber, it was a very rough start. Like, it was a lot of just like testing the waters, like, oh, I'll make like this kind of video, like a reaction video, see how that goes.
Hmm.
Oh, it just like didn't do anything. Okay, great. I'll try this, I'll try that. Little trailer review type thing. Eventually I got to this point where, and by the way, I started with Final Fantasy content because,
Fear
it might
Hunter.
the Sphere Hunter, yeah, I might
I
explain.
figured
I
it was
actually
materia related, so I was gonna ask you that too.
I
So.
actually love FF10 too.
Hmm.
I have a whole shelf of FF10 too behind me. So that's where that comes from, like the Sphere Hunter. It's just like, oh, I
Mm.
love that game. That they're Sphere Hunters. But
Hmm.
anyway, I started with Final Fantasy content and I tried out a video where I reviewed the Zodiac age of FF12, like
Mm.
Zodiac FF12 is the Zodiac age, that's what it's
Hmm.
called. Basically a remaster of FF12,
Hmm.
classic Final Fantasy game that I love a lot. And that was like the first video essay where I made where it was like intro, body, conclusion. In
Hmm.
the body there's all these points, like these bullet
Hmm.
points I want to hit with a thesis, that kind
Hmm.
of stuff. Very basic, like video essay stuff, voiceover, a little bit of on camera, cut together footage. I made that video. I really liked making it. I posted it. It didn't really do that well. I was kind of disappointed,
Hmm.
admittedly. Um, so like I just remember being so like burnt on that. Like I spent so much time on this video. Like why didn't it work out for me? So I like sort of took a break and I focused on like other stuff in my life. And
Hmm.
FF15 was out at the time, and that game was very well, maybe not very, but kind of controversial because like aspects of the story weren't finished, and
Yeah.
that stuff was coming out later. Like I'm
Uh-huh.
sure you remember like cutscenes were like coming out in patches and stuff, and it's like
Hmm.
why wasn't this here from day one?
Hmm.
Eventually, they released like a complete version of that game
The
called like
Royal
the
Edition.
Royal Edition, and I was like, "Hey, like, I'll give it a shot. Like, this is a hot topic right now, a hot button
Hmm.
issue." Um, and I made a video, "Is Final Fantasy 15, the Royal Edition, worth it?"
Hmm.
Which I think it is worth it. I think it's like a really good version of that game. But that was the video
Hmm.
that got like tons of views, got me so many subscribers and stuff like that, and just propelled
Gosh.
my YouTube career forward. And I was like, "Oh, like this is it right here."
Hmm.
And it's also the first video that had a Suzi avatar on it,
Mm.
which I think personally
Hmm.
is what drew everyone to the video, like that cute little avatar on the thumbnail.
Hmm.
But from there, it was sort of like I released like a couple more videos
Hmm.
that were Final Fantasy related, and they were doing really well. And I was like,
Hmm.
oh wow, like this is actually working. Like this is paying off. Like I'm actually like people are sticking around.
Hmm.
And at that point, I was like, well, Resident Evil is like Resident Evil and Final Fantasy are kind of like the two
Mm-hmm.
series that I love with all my heart.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, let me try some Resident Evil content. And I did why Resident Evil 0 just misses the mark, that
Mm.
video.
Mm. I just watched that one
And
last week, actually.
thank you for watching. And why the opening hour of RE7 is so effective.
Yeah.
And those videos, like, they took off as well.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, well, this is really great. And I have a really petty reason for why I started my full series retrospective. And it was because some really angry people in the comments on my RE7 video
Mm-hmm.
were like, "Oh, she likes RE7? That game isn't even a Resident Evil game.
Oh.
She's a fake fan." And I was like, "Oh, I'm a fake fan, am I?"
Mm-hmm.
And that was the motivation I needed
Mm.
to start my full series retrospective. And I started with 1, and the last one I made was on RE1 Remake, so it's sort of like
Yeah.
come
My
full circle
it
now.
was like the perfect like Resident Evil.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, survival horror perfected, and
Yeah.
that's definitely my favorite, that's my favorite video game, by the way, if for anyone who doesn't know, um, Resident Evil 1 Remake is my favorite game of all time, not just my
Mm-hmm.
favorite Resident Evil, like, it's my favorite game, and when I made that video, like, I just went all out on it, like,
Mm-hmm.
I did basically I did like tons of research. I contacted a friend in Japan, asked him some questions, which by the way, I don't know if you asked that question yet, but a big part of my research
Mm.
in the
Yeah.
dev history side is all thanks to a friend of mine who maybe named Alex Aniel, who goes by CVX Freak online, also
Okay.
massive Resident Evil fan,
Yeah.
but he's in the games industry in Japan, and he works really closely with like a lot of developers, so he actually wrote his own book on Resident Evil's development history. So it's
Mm.
like a lot of the info that I get is like
Mm.
straight from him. Like I'll call him up and I'll ask him a bunch of questions that I've written down
Mm-hmm.
about whatever Resident Evil game I'm talking about, like for a
Mm-hmm.
retrospective. And then he just lays it out, like exactly what it is, like from the developers that made it, like back in the
Mm-hmm.
day. And it's like, oh wow, cool.
Mm-hmm.
I have the story for my video. Like that, this is awesome. So
That's so awesome. And like I should have known that you started with Final Fantasy. One because obviously your name,
yes.
and yeah, you talk about Final Fantasy a lot. 10-2 is the better 10, and Final Fantasy 15 is my second favorite Final Fantasy of all time, actually.
Oh really?
Yeah, after the
Wow,
Royal
cool.
Edition, not at launch, but after
Gotcha.
episode Ignis and Arden and all
Yeah,
that stuff.
yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that's a great story. I love this Final Fantasy. After it's all completed.
Yeah, it's dark. Like it's really dark for a Final Fantasy game. There have been like Final Fantasy games that have come to that have like hit those notes in the past, like,
Hmm.
specifically like 7 and parts of 8 and stuff like that and like
Yeah, even
4
parts of
and
6, like
yeah, and 6.
Arden reminds me of Kefka. Those are the only two villains that
Exactly,
actually like
yeah.
won, right, in the series. So
Yeah, totally. And it's like, holy crap. Like I can't believe they did that again. So yeah, I'm definitely like a big fan of 15.
yeah,
Like it's one of
FF12
my
is the
faves.
only one I haven't played or finished yet. I haven't finished it.
Gotcha. FF12 it feels very classic Final Fantasy, like
Yeah,
in its like tone and story. It has like the story is very Star Wars, if
yeah.
you can
I think
imagine
I
that.
think that's why like I just have a hard time getting through it because it's like, man, I can see every beat coming, and it's like
Yeah, yeah, kind
not
of. Yeah.
engaging. I actually like the gameplay. I love the art style,
The
but like
characters are great. Yeah. Like
yeah,
it's
the characters are great like by themselves, but the story
yeah.
the story they're being pushed through is just like, man, I don't know if I could do this for another 80 hours. So,
Sure, sure. I think FF12 is actually the one where like it's the most where when I talk to people, they're like, "Oh, I haven't finished that one." And I'm like,
yeah.
"Oh, but you gotta finish it. It's so good." And they're like,
I feel terrible because like it has
Yeah.
everything I want, and I love Star Wars too. Like I don't care like if it just copies Star Wars, that's fine. So
Yeah,
like
yeah, for
I
sure.
have Zodiac Age. I bought FF12 like 5 times, and I just can't like get into it.
Yeah, yeah,
So I'm supporting I'm supporting FF12. I just need to finish it someday.
for sure.
Um, I'm excited to talk about Village. Are you?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Haven't
Okay.
haven't
Well,
done a spoiler session on this one yet.
yeah,
So
I'm so excited because you haven't done a spoiler session. I haven't even talked about the game. So if anyone out there in the audience does not want to hear anything about Resi 8 Village spoilers, we're gonna leave. Please leave now,
yes.
because we have a lot to talk about. So I'm gonna count to five. Five, four, three, two, one. Hope you're out. So what happened with Okay, so you said earlier before you actually wanted to you had one thing that you really want to talk about, spoilerish for Village.
Oh yeah, it's House Beneviento. Like,
Oh, well, House Beneviento, yeah,
oh my God.
yeah.
Like, has there been a more Silent Hill thing in years than that? Like, holy shit. Like
It's
that, I feel like that one section alone is like it made Ethan an amazing character for me. And it's all through like environmental storytelling and gameplay, like how he feels about his wife, about his
mhm.
baby who's out there somewhere. He doesn't know where the kid is. Like he's taking apart this doll of his
uh,
wife, and it's like there's like she's on the radio in the room, and it's like,
in complete silence too, right?
yeah,
You
yeah,
can hear a pin drop in the room, you know?
it's it's incredible. And like the radio is like her, like, I guess like debating whether or not she wants to abort the baby. And
Mm-hmm.
but it's all like Ethan's internal feelings on the
Mm,
situation as a whole. It's like
mm-hmm.
his fears manifest before him.
Mm-hmm.
And it like culminates so beautifully in
Mm.
massive baby.
In the baby, yeah.
Yeah, it's like holy crap, I did not see this coming. Like no matter what.
We all expected the doll to come alive, right? Like we all expect the doll
Yeah,
to
yeah.
jump at us because that's what the horror games do, right? And
Yeah,
then
like a cheap scare.
yeah. I didn't expect that section to last as long as it did. It's relatively short and you can speed run it through in like 5 minutes afterwards, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, for
But I
sure.
didn't expect the masterful tension that of just how it's just like building layer upon layer.
Yes.
So if it was just a baby at the end and nothing else, then it wouldn't be that scary.
Yeah, it'd just be like, "Oh, wait, like, what?" Like,
It was
"Oh
like,
my
okay,
god."
well, I guess I'll try to find a way around this, right?
Because it's all, like, thematically building up to that scare.
Hmm.
But and it's not only just a scare, it's, like, a gameplay section where that can play out in multiple different ways. Like, I'm not sure if you like, you can hide in the closets, or you can,
Hmm.
like, if you unlock that door, like, earlier, you could, like, run through, and the baby will chase you through that door and, like, be in different parts of the basement and stuff.
Yeah.
And, like, you could hide under the bed, which gave me big Haunting Ground vibes, by the way, which is another favorite Capcom game. It's right here.
Uh-huh.
Um, it's fantastic. Like House Beneviento is incredible. Like I feel like I'm not sure where Konami's HQ is, but I feel like someone at Capcom was just looking out the window at
Hmm.
Konami and was just like, "We'll do it ourselves."
Yeah.
Like we're gonna do it. We're gonna make a Silent Hill thing after all
Yeah.
these years.
Like, look at me. I make Silent Hill now. I make Silent Hill
Yeah.
now.
It's like Capcom, can you just buy the IP and like have whoever wrote that scenario like write the story?
Yeah, I love to, or if you could do it too. Like I would love a breakdown of like House Beneviento too, like why House Beneviento
Yeah.
is so amazing or whatever. Um,
I'm definitely gonna
it,
talk about that at some point on my channel. Like
uh,
just go into every single little detail because like like there's like a painting that falls down and it's like
hmm.
a hanged pregnant woman. Like
Hmm.
the wire of that's holding up the painting
Hmm.
is like a noose.
Yeah, it's very cool.
And it's like who like you don't expect this kind of stuff from Capcom for their horror games. Like at this point in time, like
Hmm.
maybe like if it was like the Haunting Ground days when they were
Hmm.
being like a little bit more like edgy, like with this kind of subject matter. It's just so like it was so surprising
It
on
was so
multiple
understated.
levels.
It was so
Yeah,
understated,
exactly.
which is so against like the rest of the game that surrounds it, right? Like it's just like this
Yeah.
quiet, dark little heart of the game, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And it's
Uh,
like right in the middle of the game too. It's like, oh wow.
And
I love that.
what I like you said about it was how it reflects Ethan. It really is like Ethan projecting so much
Yeah,
of his anxieties and his fears and his hatred like out in across his basement in
exactly.
his house, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And there's so many these like items that you can find from his past, like
Hmm.
that you see in the house, that in
Hmm.
his house at the beginning. It's like just such a perfect build up and like payoff. Like the execution is like phenomenal. And it's
Hmm.
like if that wasn't in the game, like I would think Ethan was a better character just because, in the rest of the game, like they actually like made him emote and like interact with the things around him.
Hmm.
But that really like cements him as like a good character, like a
Hmm.
good Resident Evil character, like a survival horror protagonist. Like
Yes,
when
exactly.
that game finished, like and I had the context of his whole journey, I was like, wow, Ethan is like a survival horror protagonist. He even has like a cool jacket, like
I just
it's
published
awesome.
today my piece, The Real Tragedy of Ethan Winters,
Yeah.
the village idiot of Resident Evil.
The village.
uh, and I basically argued that yeah, he is definitely like a classic survival horror protagonist. He's Harry Mason. He's James Sunderland. You know, he's got the
Yeah,
same
for
stupid
sure.
jacket on, and
Yeah.
he's saying the same stupid stuff like back to he's making the same dumb observations.
Yeah,
But the
yeah, for
writing
sure.
with Capcom is so much better with Lady Dimitrescu and with even with Heisenberg and with Mother Miranda. The writing
Yeah,
is so much better that it's such a sharp contrast to this classic survival horror protagonist bumbling
for
his way
sure.
through village. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just have I by the end of the game I just had such true appreciation for Ethan and who he is as a video game character. You know. Um,
It's really funny, like, that you bring all of that up and, like, we're on the subject of him, like, feeling like a classic protagonist, like,
Mhm.
there's, like, one line, it like, during the final boss where, like, the final boss is like, "Your baby's mine now," and then he
Mhm.
says something like, "Take Rose? There's no way I'll let you get away with that," and it's just like, "Yes, Ethan, yes, I'm so happy that you just said that."
Yeah.
Like, even at, like, the end of his journey, like, he's
Yeah.
still throwing out, like, one-liners like that,
He's
like,
he's
so
still like
fun.
determined and like still like trying
Yeah.
his best, you know, and
Yeah.
it's so
It's
incredible.
fantastic, yeah, it's so good.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. How long did you play on hardcore
I
difficulty?
played on normal. I did not play
Gotcha.
on hardcore, and I'm glad I
Okay.
didn't because as soon as we got to hardcore, I was like, "This is for New Game Plus." I'm sorry, like you need
Yeah.
like upgraded weapons to survive this first fight, you know?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, like, if you did, like, how long did it take you to get past that? Because it's tough, that opening scene. It's very much like a combination of RE4 and 5's openings, where it's like you have to barricade yourself
Hmm.
in these, like, houses, but there's also, like, a big guy with a hammer, like, chasing
Hmm.
you, and it's just, like, constant, like, guys are coming through windows, and it's just so cool to see, like, how they've evolved that tech of, like, enemies, like, trying to get into a house
Hmm.
that you've locked yourself in, and it's like,
Yeah.
they are coming from everywhere. They're coming from, like, the roof, they're coming from the windows, the front
The
door.
basement, the downstairs, you
Yeah.
can escape in the downstairs, and they're like, "Oh, I'm safe in here," and I was like, "Oh, they're coming in here too! Oh my
Yeah,
god!"
yeah.
You know?
Exactly. Totally.
Uh,
Like,
uh,
the enemy design is great in this game. I really enjoyed it.
the enemy design is incredible. Like,
Yeah.
there's so much variety of werewolves. You know? Uh,
Yeah. And the full werewolf can do so much. Like,
oh
the one
yeah,
that's on all fours, like,
yeah.
I thought I was being smart. Like, I, like, was hiding from it, and I was collecting all the resources in the area, and I
Hmm.
climbed to the top of that one house, and I was like, "Oh,
Hmm.
I'll just snipe it from up here." That thing can jump onto the roof with you, and
Yeah.
I was like and, like, a Benny Hill sketch, like, I was just like, "Okay, I'm gonna run under that house over there," and before I could even get, like, into the little crevice,
Hmm.
there's, like, a custom animation that they did of the wolf, like, going into the hole with you and dragging you out and, like, throwing you across the road, and it's like,
That's
"This is
what happened to
insane."
me in
Like
the house too. I was like, all right, I'm just gonna knife him as he's trying to like reach into me, right? I was
Yeah.
like, I'm so smart, this stupid video game monster, and then he just like grabbed me and threw me out of the house. I was like, okay, well,
Yeah.
so much for that tactic, video game, you know?
It's so cool. They've just, like, gone above and beyond with this game, like, just in, like, every area, like, it's so cool. But anyway, like
Remember, was it you who didn't really don't really like the cabin sections though, when it's just like in Resi 3 remake, when Carlos has to just like barricade himself in the hospital. I remember
I like
I remember
them.
you didn't like that part.
I like them when they're well done. I
Yeah.
think RE4 obviously like birthed the cabin
Hmm.
section, and there I think it's like perfect because it's like the perfect amount of enemies overwhelming you, like with, they're like throwing ladders like up through the windows and like coming through the like every like they're just coming out of the woodwork. They're everywhere. I
Even
think.
Luis with you and Ashley, who's kind of screaming, so like it adds to that
Oh
hectic
yeah, for
atmosphere,
sure.
right?
For sure. And
Yeah.
RE5 has a cabin like right at the start, but it doesn't last long at all. Like within seconds you're outside and you're
Hmm.
doing stuff. But then like you get to like the weird situations of like RE3 remake where not only is it like I would have preferred anything else gameplay wise than just the cabin again, but like the
Mm.
enemies are like exploding with like a Nickelodeon
Oh
splat sound
yeah.
effects,
The,
and
the,
it's like it feels very, yeah, it feels very like slapped together, like rushed.
because like they
But
couldn't render that many bodies in one room versus like,
yeah, yeah.
like we can go up and down the stairs and that's fine,
Exactly. And
but
like
it's
we
like
could despawn them when you're not looking. It's like,
yeah,
oh, this is like right in front of my face and it looks horrible.
yeah.
But like Village is like you can create a cabin scenario if you want. Like they
Mhm,
never force you into a cabin. It's like,
mhm,
oh, I can do this if I want to.
mhm.
So that's why I like it in Village. But like
Yeah,
in RE3, it's just like, oh, like what is this? Like
yeah.
why?
Let's talk about the villains before we get to the ending. I'm
Yes.
excited to talk about the ending, but let's run down the villains. What do you think of Lady Dimitrescu?
I thought she's fantastic.
Yeah.
She's like my favorite character in the game, for a lot of reasons. I was looking forward to her the whole time, like the
What
whole like.
surprised you about her, if anything? Because there's so much expectation placed on her, right?
Yeah, I think the way she plays, I think the way she operates in gameplay
Hmm.
surprised me the most because all the marketing for the game made it seem like she was going to be just a boss and the daughters were going to be the pursuers, but she's
Hmm.
also just a pursuer in the
Hmm.
castle. And I thought that was really cool. She's like, as a pursuer, she definitely doesn't operate as well as like Jack Baker or
Her
like
ex,
Mr.
yeah,
X,
yeah.
but I really appreciated it. For the story, I was really surprised that she wasn't around for that long.
Hmm.
And I think that's a good thing and a bad thing. Like, it's a
Hmm.
great thing because they didn't show any of the game in the
Hmm.
marketing, which is fantastic. And
Hmm.
it's a bad thing because I like the character and I want to see more of her. Like, because she has
Yeah.
such a striking and memorable personality. Like
Mhm.
everything she said, like she makes fun of Ethan's arms because she's fucking ripped. Like I thought
Yeah.
that was hilarious. Like she's just
Wait,
like,
what
your
did he say
arms.
about what did she say about his arms?
She's just like, your arms, they're so pathetic. And then
I didn't
like
even hear
during
that
gameplay,
during
it's like an
gameplay.
optional line. Yeah.
I miss my first run. I missed when she would just talk to her daughters like in the hallways. I missed those parts.
Yeah, and there's a couple of those too,
There's a
depending
couple of
on
them.
which daughter
Yeah.
you take down first. It's like she will talk, she'll call upon and then scold one of the
Sandra.
daughters.
It's like
Yeah.
I was like, wait, what's going on?
Yeah, it's like, wait a minute. This game is like alive while I'm not interacting with
Yeah,
it.
I
That's
was like, when
fantastic.
does this game like become like Fable? Like they're just
Yeah,
like having
yeah.
their own lives, like as I'm like doing my puzzles. That's crazy. That like it
Yeah,
just
yeah.
really like livened up her castle.
For sure,
Um,
yeah. And that was definitely my favorite part. I saw a lot of people complaining that it didn't last very long. And
mhm,
for me, it did last a long time because I made sure to make the whole map blue. Like I got like
mm.
every item. So I actually did see a lot of Lady D because I had to
Yeah,
like run
you
away
got
from
the
her.
basement, the basement iron insignia key door too, and everything, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Gotta get them all.
definitely. Exactly.
Um, I was definitely sad when we killed her. Um,
Yeah.
uh, after the boss, I was like, oh, wow. I was like, I didn't want to say that's it, but like that's how I felt, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, let's go see what else is coming up. And then the House Beneviento made me forget it all. I was just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
wow, this is survival horror. So
Yeah, exactly. This is like
I
10 out of 10. Like,
yeah,
let's go.
I feel like we talked about Donna Beneviento already. Was there anything
Yeah,
about her character that you feel like they really didn't expand upon her much other than like the lore that you read, you know?
yeah, it's basically all through files, which I think is really interesting.
Hmm.
I don't know if you did you fight the optional boss? like
Which one?
at her house. Okay, so there's like that big like grave in front of her house.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
like I think that's really interesting because like if you read the files, there's like a gardener there.
Uh,
And I'm like, "Oh, is that the gardener?"
is that the
Like
gardener? I didn't even
because
put that together. Maybe,
yeah.
yeah.
So that
Guarding Claudia Benevento's grave, right?
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure that's what's happening there. But yeah, I think I thought Donna was really cool. I like how she like kind of communicates through the like fungus
Mm-hmm.
inside of the dolls. Like I thought that was really cool. But yeah, not a whole lot that we get to see, but there is tons that we get to read about.
Mm-hmm.
So I would have liked to see like a little bit more of her like in like her humanoid form,
I
like just
know she
walking
looked great. Like
around.
all the women in the game look amazing, you know. So I'm just
Yeah.
like, but they
Oh,
all look
very
fabulous.
pretty.
Wow, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, poor Moreau that he doesn't look as great. And
Yeah.
we don't get to see much of him either. I think he was probably the most disappointing out of all of them, and he just didn't really have much to do. I guess I
Yeah.
actually kind of like this fight after a while, but
Yeah, definitely. As a character, like he's disappointing as a character, like in
hmm
the story, but like I really enjoyed the like puzzle like to get to the boss fight where you have to
hmm
like flip all the switches and like run across the bridges like in time and like restore the power with the cranks and stuff like that.
hmm
There's an RE3 classic reference where the crank breaks and it like breaks in the exact same way
hmm
as Jill's crank does at the
hmm
gas station in the original
yeah
RE3. And I was like,
yeah.
"Oh wow, cool. I get it. I understand." But yeah, that boss fight I think is like one of the better ones. Like I really liked how he can like make it rain acid like on
And
you.
that part was awesome.
Yeah,
As soon as I was like, okay, that part's cool. Like you really got to hide
for
underneath it,
sure.
and like
Exactly.
I love that. It was a real classic Resident Evil chase boss of
Oh yeah, for
like
sure.
a PlayStation One boss of like here's your Rita, and he's gonna funnel you through these hallways, and
Yeah,
it
and
was fun.
you can really set them up with like the landmines and stuff like that, and like the
hmm
explosive barrels that are like littered around. Like that boss fight was really cool. I really enjoyed
Yeah,
it. But
I
yeah.
also appreciate like the Quasimodo type of flavor that he brings to like the crew, the squad
Oh yeah,
of
for sure.
the Miranda squad, right?
The
Um,
Miranda's gone.
so like he brings some color. I think Heisenberg.
Every single character is like a gothic horror trope. Like Lady D obviously is Dracula.
hmm
Donna Beneviento is like traditional ghost house
hmm
stories. Um, I would say that Moreau is like Creature from the Black Lagoon, but I think
Yeah, the Swamp
I,
Thing type of
yeah,
thing.
like I think what you said is also applies for sure. And Heisenberg
Heisenberg is
is
Magneto,
Frankenstein. Oh, yeah, I was gonna say Frankenstein, but Magneto is
Magneto
better.
slash Frankenstein
Yeah,
slash Van Helsing, uh,
yeah, exactly.
slash Walter White, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, he's probably cooking something up.
Heisenberg was so interesting, and his part was the part where I was not sure about for a while until I ended up loving
Yeah.
it. Um,
Oh, did you?
but I did because the factory did last long, right?
It does,
Um,
yeah, for sure.
and I think it's because of his boss fight that I ended up liking the factory because it
Oh,
was
really?
because it was just so manic,
Sure.
that I felt like being underground for so long kind of felt like this release of like fight like this mech fight, this junkyard mech
Yeah.
fight between Ethan and and Heisenberg. It's like,
Yeah. That's like I think that's where we differ a little bit because
uh-huh.
I wasn't a
You
fan of
weren't
the
a fan of Factory,
factory
yeah.
because I feel like it drags and I feel like it feels like because the whole game is kind of like callbacks to the classic games,
hmm
like everything that came before it. Heisenberg's factory, like from a level design standpoint, like it
hmm
feels like the worst aspects of the series kind of
mm
like put together. Like it's like cramped hallways
hmm
that are all gray and look the same, and it lasts forever. And there's
hmm
an elevator, just like Code Veronica, where it's like,
hmm
where am I going right now? What am I
Yeah.
doing? And it's
The
like
elevator part did confuse me, where I
the
was just like,
map
okay,
doesn't
which floor am
really
I
make
on?
sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
like and I didn't really like the boss fight. I thought I thought it went a little too over the top for
Yeah.
Resident Evil, which some people disagree with. And I get it. Like I
No,
totally get it. Like
I
it's
don't disagree with that. I think it definitely went over the top for Resident Evil.
yeah.
Absolutely.
The second he started saying the memes, I was like,
Uh-huh.
what game am I playing right
This
now?
button
Like
punching asshole. And
yeah,
it's
I was like, holy shit.
like Sheva told everybody.
Yeah, like she had to have. Like, how did he figure that out? Like, come
Yeah.
on.
And then so like Heisenberg is like in this village where, as we understand from reading the lore, they were just getting newspapers every once in a while to kind of like understand what was going on in the world.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
Sheva must have given like a CNN interview where it's like, yeah, we were in a volcano, and then like I was on the other side and Wesker was after me, and then Sheva like Chris punched a boulder, and then everyone's like, what? Chris punched a boulder, and then
He's
Heisenberg's
really
in his little
strong.
newspaper castle factory, and you're like,
Yeah.
wow, this guy punched a boulder.
Like, I hope I never encounter him. And it's just like,
Wow, I hope he doesn't come and blow up our stuff, you know?
yeah, exactly. And I remember like it was crazy. So like the first because I played it for review, you know, like we got it early, we got the game early,
Hmm.
and like just having the info, like the knowledge of that boss fight, I was so not about it. Like I hated it at first.
Hmm.
Like I'm okay with it now. Like it is what it is. Like I don't hate it anymore. But when
Hmm.
I first played it, I was like, could Chris like why didn't Chris do this and I go plant the bombs? Can I
Yeah.
do that? Can I do the B scenario of this
Yeah.
situation? But like and I feel that way about the factory as a whole. Like I still don't really like it, but after I stream the game, like sort of like knowing where to go, like knowing what to
Hmm.
do, it definitely it drags less. It feels a little bit better, and I can appreciate that the design of the enemies
Hmm.
too. Like I feel like they actually did quite a few interesting things with those enemies. Like they can actually lose sight of you, which is like
Hmm.
something I didn't know about in the first playthrough. So like
Hmm.
you can hide from those enemies and like
The little
yeah,
guys with the knives. Yeah.
the drill
Yeah.
guys, yeah.
Yeah, Heisenberg drill guys. Yeah.
I and that was another thing too. Like I was like, are there's jetpacks in Resident Evil right now? Like who made the jetpacks? Where did you get these jetpacks, sir? And they're just flying around and they do the laser thing and then they like slide at you. I was like, what is happening? Like this is such a tonal shift from like slow atmospheric like exploration in the castle, you know? Like
It really was, and I was like, I'm not sure like what they're doing here. And by the Heisenberg fight, I was like, this is just Resident Evil 6. I was like
yeah,
I didn't want
exactly.
to say it, but this is as wacky as Resident Evil 6 was. I'm sorry, it really
Yeah,
is.
for sure.
They really went back there, you know?
And I feel like it sort of like calls back to the love letter design of the game as a
Mm-hmm.
whole. Like
Mm-hmm.
because literally like there are just references to the series all throughout. And that boss fight is like, do you guys remember RE6? Like, do you remember
Mm-hmm.
when you fought that T-Rex? Like, well, here's
Mm-hmm.
something more insane. A
Mm-hmm.
flesh Gundam. Like a flesh and metal Gundam. Like, oh, and by the way, you're gonna be fighting it in your own mech. And it's like,
Yeah, you're gonna have your own
okay,
mech, and he's gonna say stuff like, "I'm your only fan." I'm just like,
what are you talking
like,
about? Like, like
I know that's not an OnlyFans reference, but maybe you could like word it some other way, you know, so we don't have to
yeah,
like.
like
It's not so memeable, you know.
exactly, exactly.
So like, I totally get that. Like, as soon as he started spotting memes, like it's
Yeah,
just like, okay, maybe it's a little too much, you know.
just a little bit. But then,
Yeah.
like, the coolest thing ever happens right after where you play as that guy right there.
Hmm.
And I literally screamed out loud.
Uh huh.
Okay, so let's back up just a little bit.
Sure.
Ethan totally fucking dies.
Uh
Like he
huh.
bites the dust in like the most glorious way possible, just getting his
Uh huh.
heart ripped out
Uh huh.
by Mother Miranda, the actual big bad.
Blood poured over her face and everything.
Exactly. That I was actually like hooting and hollering at that point. Like I was
Uh-huh.
like, oh, that boss fight was really stupid. Oh my god, this is so cool.
Yeah.
But I literally said out loud the code Veronica Chris switch
Uh huh.
because it felt like that. It's so like to me, it really, really felt like that where you get to
Hmm.
that point in Code Veronica and then Chris shows up and it's like, oh,
Hmm.
the day is saved. We're gonna be okay, guys.
Hmm.
Like Chris is here. Like Captain America's here. You know. And
I'm
I
so glad you
absolutely
said
love that
that.
part.
I'm so glad you said that because it really, really reminded me of the classic Resident Evil perspective shifts, you know,
Yeah, for sure.
where it just comes like, hey, you're Ada or you're Sherry now or whatever, you know,
Yeah, yeah, totally.
and it's like, yeah, you're Chris now, and the main character is dead, you know, and
Yeah. It's
And
like, where are
now
we
you're
gonna go from
carrying
here?
all of that knowledge and information back into the village with all of his guns and his big arms.
I know,
And
and it's so cool that the village is just like chaos. Like it's like all on fire. It's destroyed. The lichens are like overrunning it.
mega Musite tower
Yeah,
like in the back, and I was like, this is like way more crazy than Resident Evil 6 probably at this point,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Like this is wild, you
And
know?
it keeps that theme like throughout the whole game of like which I love that like the main village area is like constantly changing like the
Mm-hmm.
more you progress and like you
Mm-hmm.
just get to that point where it's just like it's done. Like the village is just gone and it's time to clean this place up. Like, like
I
it was so
love
much
that
fun.
they always changed the village every time you went back, especially like the little save room cabin where like Chris's equipment would show up in there.
Yeah, yeah, that was so cool.
It felt like an evolution of like Mr. X like barging into the save room in RE2 remake, and it's like, okay, there's no safe space in this game, right? And it's
Yeah.
like we are going to actually change the environment around you, and you're not even going to notice it. So like
Yeah, definitely.
it's always keeping you on edge, where it's like, okay, what's gonna happen next? Because like this computer was not here at this church, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
it's one of those things where like it goes back to what we said before, where like the game world feels alive, where it's like, oh, Chris and his buddies are here, and
uh-huh.
they're somewhere in the village, and like this is
Yeah,
their little base. Like I thought that was super cool.
yeah. Did you
And
find
there's another part like that too, where there's like a cave that
yeah,
has like his
you find a
gear in
little
it.
Chris cave.
Yeah, the Chris cave. That's where he's been this whole time.
Just have like weights there and everything.
There's
I
like a
wish it
bench
had weights
press.
there. That would have been
Yeah.
nice.
There's like a pull-up bar like in the threshold of the cave that he's just like
Yeah,
doing his pull-ups, knocking them out.
yeah. I also love that they use the same trailer music from the Village reveal
Yes.
trailer in there because I
Yes.
love that song and I was like, is this just stock trailer music or is this actually in the game? And then once I was like, oh, this is Chris's boss music. That's what
Yeah,
it
like
was.
it's his theme and it's so perfect because it's like horror hype. Like that's
Yeah,
how I describe it. Like it sounds scary, but it gets you so pumped up to just kill everything.
yeah. And you hear Rose like crying in the background of the
Yeah.
temple, and it's just like, man, like Chris
It's
is there to like
amazing.
get Rose and like avenge Ethan, and it's like, oh,
Exactly.
yeah, you know.
It was perfect. Yeah, like you just get so pumped up to do it. And like that's exactly why I just like I opened my review with that song. Like I did like that little music video at the start with like all the
Mhm.
clips, but I had that song playing because
Oh,
it's
I have to watch
so
it again.
good. Yeah,
Yeah, it's such a great
it's so
song.
cool.
How'd you feel about Oswald Spencer's connection with Mother Miranda?
So, in my review, I
Mm-hmm.
did talk about how there were some things that felt like kind of lazy,
Mm-hmm.
and that in particular was what I was talking about. So like RE7 a big point of contention with like some of the hardcore fans
Mm-hmm.
was that there weren't enough like connections to the overall series. And I totally get where people are coming from. Like I love RE7 for what it is. Like those tiny little Easter eggs like littered throughout that game
Mm-hmm.
were enough for me. I feel like this it's basically the lore room, right? Like it's
Yeah,
Miranda's lab where she's been
it's a lore fountain, basically, right?
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
It's Miranda's lab where she lays out how she made all the enemies and stuff like that. But then there's one file that is just like a letter from Oswald Spencer,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like I really like I love and appreciate that the connection is in this game, that it's there,
Mm-hmm.
but I think the content of the connection
Mm-hmm.
isn't very good at all
Mm-hmm.
because the letter is basically him confirming to us and
Mm-hmm.
Chris, because we're the only people that would understand this letter at
That's
all.
true.
Like,
Yeah.
it's confirming that like he got the umbrella logo from a design that him and Miranda found in a cave years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and it it's inconsistent because his whole thing is like he wants eternal life, he wants to live forever,
Mm-hmm.
and Miranda finds that, and he's just like, okay, I'm out, like I'm good, like
Yeah.
what you're doing is like too crazy for me. But it's like, dude, it's there, it's right there, like the mold is what you want, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what you
Yeah.
want. So it felt
Look
like
at Lady D, you know? She's so, I
exactly.
mean, she looks great, you know?
Yeah, and that like I think in like one of the files it's like she got infected with the mold in like the 50s. So she's been
Mhm.
living forever at this point
Mhm.
and still looks like 40 or whatever. So it's like
Mhm.
that when I read that, I was happy to see the name and like and I had the acknowledgement of yes, there's a connection. I like that. I'm so happy 7 and 8 are part of this giant world.
Mhm.
But like what it was, like I wasn't really feeling it. I was
It's a
just kind of
pretty
like, oh,
weak
okay.
connection because it's basically like Spencer started all this because his ex-girlfriend had the idea and then he just kind of like ran with it
Yeah,
basically, right?
where I believe, and don't quote me on this, where I believe like there has been conflicting like pieces of lore throughout the series that
Mhm.
go against that, where it's like, oh, it's like him and this group of people like
Mhm.
starting a company, like they want to
Marcus
start a
and
company. Exactly.
Brendan Bailey and all these other
Yeah, yeah,
names
yeah.
that I can just conjure up for whatever reason, you know?
Barnum and Bailey Circus,
Yeah.
you know.
uh,
So I really liked it. I liked Miranda as a character. I thought she was really cool. Like her design is fantastic. She's been my wallpaper for like, you know, ever since I got the game for review like weeks
mhm.
ago at this point. But I think that in particular was really weird. And I used to have a problem with Chris and just not telling Ethan his plan, but I'm okay with it now because it's like I've sort of rationalized it as like he didn't want to get like civilians in trouble, like
Mhm.
involved, you know.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it wouldn't have happened. I guess we would have just had a Chris game where Chris just destroys the
yeah,
village.
yeah,
You know, if none of that happened, right? So we wouldn't have never had Ethan. One of the conflicting things also you brought up the logo is that like I swear they said the logo was meant to represent the four houses of the four lords. So why was it that symbol like some random thing they found in the cave? I guess that's something that I couldn't really connect either. So.
yeah. There's definitely some conflicting info there. Yeah. And there's like a newspaper that you can find, or there's like a file you can find that talks
Mhm.
about a guy reading a newspaper and like seeing the logo like
Mhm.
in the paper, and
Mhm.
it's like all this is kind of
Yeah, and and it's great that you mentioned that Chris and the player are the only people in the entire game that would read that document of Oswald Spencer and understand the
yeah,
ramifications of it. Because if it
for
was
sure.
Ethan, he'd just be like, just like it was just
Okay,
like
nothing.
nothing
Yeah,
would process like because he sees the umbrella logo and he's like, wow, that looks really
that
familiar.
looked familiar.
And it's
Yeah.
like that's like if I ended up like in the middle of East Romania and like in the middle of Transylvania Castle, and then I see the Apple logo, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
wow, that logo looks familiar. Instead of like, what the hell is the Apple logo doing here? Like, you know?
Okay, so when I streamed the game, I was like, when we got to that point, like the chat was like, "Oh, like why is he? How does he not know the umbrella logo?" And I was like, "Oh, well, guys, like it makes sense if you think about it because he's he's just a normal guy, and umbrella hasn't been a thing in a long time." But then I thought, like, Blue Umbrella is the company that saves him at the end of 7. So even
Mhm.
then, it doesn't make
Oh
any
my God,
sense
I
at
totally forgot.
all.
Yes, that blue
Yeah.
umbrella with Chris saves him. So it's
So
like, why
why
would you
doesn't he?
not know? It's like
Yeah,
it's like being saved by the Red Cross, and then like 3 years later, you see a Red Cross, and you're like, what is that thing? I'm like, whatever.
exactly. It's like, oh, I guess it's something. It looks kind of familiar to me.
Yeah. I guess
So
I
yeah,
wasn't so confused about Chris going against the BSAA too, because like I remember something in Resi 5 where they were like, oh, the BSAA is kind of like being funded by Trisol and stuff like that. So I don't know.
yeah. The BSAA thing is weird just because like they've always seemed like a kind of corporation
Hmm.
in the sense because like in Revelations, like
Oh
it turns out
yeah.
that like the BSAA was like kind of working with like Veltro and in like some way, and it's like I don't know where they're going with this now because it's like it just brings up so many other questions in my mind. Like, are Barry and Jill still in the BSAA? Like
Yeah.
what is going on? Like,
I have
is
yeah, I
is
yeah,
Chris gonna like call them on the phone and tell them that they're making
usually we can
zombies?
kind of tell like where Resident Evil might go at the end of it, but like at the end of Resident Evil 8, I have no idea where they could go with this. So that's kind of exciting
Yeah.
and also kind of speaks to like how they keep coming up with things that we don't really know what to expect. And half of that seems like they're just
Sure.
making things up on the spot, so that's why we don't expect it. So, you know,
Yeah, I mean, that's always been like the
oops.
Resident Evil curse of like, oh, I can't wait to see what happens next. And then it's just like, oh, it's a new company. Like, there's a new company and a new villain. Okay. I guess I'll
Hold on a
take it.
second. My sound just went out. There you go. Hello?
Oh, can you
Oh,
hear
there you
me?
go. Yeah.
Okay.
No, my foot hit something.
Uh-oh.
Anyways, probably a good time to call it a day anyways, because
Oh yeah, for sure.
we're well past an hour, and honestly, I could talk about, I don't know. Was there
Yes.
anything else you wanted to get off your chest?
Uh,
Yeah.
I,
Because
you know,
I keep going on forever, so.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Overall, I really like the story, but there were definitely some things about it that I didn't really like. And one thing that we didn't mention yet is
Mm.
Ethan's daughter, Rose, in the after
Oh
credits,
God, yes, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Rose actually for.
which it kind of scares me
Uh-huh.
because I don't know if she has like superpowers and the next game is going to be a Resident Evil movie.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
Do we get
what happened?
a net? Is it going to be a Netflix show? Like how serious are they about this
Yeah.
whole reverse verse thing? You
Oh
know.
my god.
So I don't know,
Yeah.
and I don't know how much further you can spin out Resident Evil, because it's
Especially that story for sure. Like you definitely
yeah.
would like I would try to like if it was me, I would maybe pull in some classic characters for like one more go or
Hmm.
just complete new characters in
Yeah,
like
maybe
a
we'll
whole
get
new
Old
thing.
Man Chris or old Lady Jill. Like maybe we can get the old Lady Jill that we can finally get, where she's trying to rescue Rose
Yes.
again. I don't know.
I guess we'll
Um.
have to wait and see.
Oh, and
Don't
real
know.
quick, what are your favorite Resident Evil games? I put out my list, and I listed Resi 4, Resi 2 Remake, Resi 1 Remake, Resi 3 in general, and
Yeah.
Resi 7 as my top five.
I
So,
feel like I have a very boring list and it kind of identifies me as a type of fan, but
hmm
like it's remake 1,
hmm
RE3
hmm
classic,
hmm
RE2 classic,
hmm
RE2 remake,
hmm
and Resident Evil Outbreak
Yeah,
1.
you love the classics. So do I.
I
Like
do.
they're my favorite.
With like a
I'm
sprinkling of the modern in there.
yeah, but like as long as it has like weird winding hallways and level design and like tons of inventory
Exactly.
management and time management, then like it's just like a salve for my mind. Like I can just relax,
Exactly,
you
right?
know. It's like
Village has that stuff. Village
Village has
definitely
it.
has it.
I liken it to like a Rubik's cube that like people can just solve like over and over again.
You
Like
liken it?
yeah, or liken it. Like
Sorry, I had to do it. I had to
I
do it.
liken it to like a Rubik's cube where you just kind of like doing it over and over again just to like relieve stress or whatever.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
that's why I like playing Resident Evil games because it's like I just like
Same.
beating it over and over again. It's just so much fun. So
Exactly, yeah. I'm very much in that camp too. But yeah, I think we've I think we've covered everything. Oh my god.
yeah. Well, thanks so much everyone for just hearing us rant and rave about Resident
Yeah.
Evil. You got a sneak peek about Susie's spoiler review.
Yes.
But please go to subscribe to her channel. She's got a ton of subscribers, but you know, more people should see her stuff because she's just really one of the better essayists on YouTube.
Thank
Especially when you want to
you.
like Resident Evil, Final Fantasy. Like, do not test her because she will do a video. Do not test her knowledge because she will do a video that will just blow everyone away. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I'll try I
um,
try my best. I try my
yeah.
best.
Susie, thanks so much for joining us here at the Washington Post and
Oh,
Launcher,
for
and
sure.
thank you everybody for watching. And have a great weekend, all. And happy Mass Effect launch day too. And we're gonna,
Yes.
yeah, we're
Gonna go
talking so
play.
much about Resident Evil, but we got a lot of Mass Effect to play after this. So,
Definitely.
yeah,
Yes. I will see you all later. Later, guys. Later, chat
and
room.